Hi, folks. One of our topics this week is the question of why soldiers enlisted, volunteered, and went to fight in the Civil War. And our textbook does a pretty good job, I think, of giving examples of the really mixed motivations on the part of people on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line. And what I think you can do when you think about that question of why soldiers enlisted, if you look at other more recent wars, like the conflict that my dad and uncles fought in the Second World War, and there's a lot of similarity there. The United States Army and federal government during the Second World War became concerned when, I guess, their polling and research showed that a large number of GIs could not articulate what the war was about. And so they actually made a film series, which is kind of famous, entitled Why We Fight, and had soldiers and service people watch this to educate them so that they could at least know the basics of what was going on during the Second World War and who the enemy was and why we're resisting Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. And so that was true in an era in the 20th century in which you had modern media. And so arguably it was much more, it was much easier for people to be informed. And so if we back up to a century earlier, it's not surprising, arguably, that many people during the Civil War would not have really been able to explain what the war was about, or that they would have varying explanations for why they were fighting. And I think for the Civil War, a huge number of people are fighting because their community, their town, is raising the local regiment, and many people tend to go along with what their neighbors and other people are doing in kind of sort of a natural way. During the Second World War, of course, that applied as well. People like my father, who lied about his age and went into the U.S. Navy at age 15. If you could have, probably polled my father and asked him at the time, why do you want to do this? There were several reasons that had nothing to do with fighting fascism or defeating Hitler. My dad wanted to go to war because his two big brothers had gone and he was left behind at home. Also, I think my father wanted to go to war because that was more exciting than staying in high school. And if you go to the Civil War era, how many young men on both sides enlisted to get away from the family farm? It's like, if I stay here, what am I doing? Plowing, doing heavy manual labor, and getting away and going someplace else would be attractive. Also, most young people in the 19th century probably had done very limited traveling. And so enlisting meant leaving home and kind of seeing more of the world. And that would have been highly attractive. For my father, that was part of the story. He lived on the East Coast. He had traveled as a teenager, like from his home in Delaware to New York City and Philadelphia and places like that. But he had never been to the West, never been all the way out to California. And this kind of opened a world for him. And one of the consequences was that my father did not want to move back into the neighborhood he had grown up in. And my grandparents expected that he would settle down, build a house, and live down the street from them. My father wanted nothing to do with that because the war had changed him. He had seen, he'd been to the Pacific, traveled outside the United States, and it had changed him. And so the Civil War, I think especially early on, has that attractive element for young people to have an adventure, to leave home. There's also the glamour of being in uniform. If you want if you want young women to dance with you, being in uniform can have a kind of a transformative effect. That's why in the Second World War, many people enlisted for the Army Air Corps, because having the aviator's wings on your lapel or wearing that uniform meant that you were much more glamorous than the typical GI in a foxhole. My students oftentimes, especially on-ground students, if you ask them, why do people fight in the Civil War? They'll say, well, the South is fighting for slavery and the North is fighting against slavery. And of course, the war at root is about slavery, but the majority of soldiers on both sides wouldn't have said that. And this week, as you're doing your reading, that's probably been made clear. So hope you're enjoying the mid part of the semester. These classes go so fast that we're almost to the half point already, and I kind of regret that. But have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you later.